BC Nation, what happens when the devil attacks your strength and shapes it into a weakness? JD, Danny McCabe, maintained a loving relationship with his wife for nearly 20 years before the underpinnings of their marriage, family, and world began to crumble. Their foundation had always been rooted in the mantra that trust is the bedrock of a healthy relationship. Indeed, his wife had always claimed things couldn't work without trust. But one day, for reasons Danny could not fathom, his wife became suspicious of his every move. Phone calls, text messages, and work emails were manufactured into proof of infidelity, drug addiction, and a network of lies. Now, for any of you listening right now that have ever been falsely accused, false accusations, been attacked by the enemy through that, I know I have in my life many times in relationships, you're really going to want to listen to this show. And this isn't a show that's going to just be all negative. This is a show of going from struggle to triumph through the grace of God. So JD's wife enlisted her mother into her efforts, and together they forged the words of family, trust, and honesty into a metaphorical hammer and beat JD into the ground. Their accusations accumulated, twisting reality and eventually resulting in Danny's involuntary hospitalization. So today, my guest is JT McCabe. He is the author of The Third Gift. You can find him at thethirdgift.com. JD, welcome to Broken Catholic, #1 podcast on iTunes for Protestants and Catholics. Go ahead and just take 60 seconds and fill in some of the gaps in that intro, would you?
Yeah, well, first of all, Joseph, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a privilege to be on your top-rated podcast. So thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I think the intro covered a lot of it. We were in a very happy, stable marriage for 17 years. And, right at the mark of the 17th wedding anniversary is when the accusations of infidelity began. And then shortly thereafter, it was accusations around drug addiction. And a lot of that was prompted by some unexpected weight loss that I began to experience in the spring of 2014, when I suddenly, in less than 6 weeks, lost 35 pounds. I started working out a little bit, but initially I thought that was the reason for the weight loss. And then it was 40 pounds, then it was 45 pounds. And then ultimately that further strengthened her accusations of infidelity and drug addiction. And she got her mom involved and on board and turned her into what they call a negative advocate, and she quickly began the verbal assaults as well, and the skepticism and speculation that there was something going on with me.
Got it. All right. So before we get into that story, and we're going to go into it and we're going to go deep, and BC Nation, as you're listening, I'd like you to grab a pen and paper because I believe JD is going to reveal through his story some gold nuggets of wisdom for you. And you're going to possibly hear your story within his. That's why I do this show. I do this show so that you can hear the struggles that you have right now in your life. You're not the only one. You're not alone in it. Others are going through it. Others have gone through it. Others have come out the other side. So I do this show that you can, one, not feel alone, but feel that you're part of a human family, a body of Christ. And two, that you can feel that you're going to be okay. And what's missing right now, possibly, is your full trust and reliance and leaning and falling upon God. When you have nothing, you have no more strength, you just can't go on anymore. It's that stripping away of self. It's that dying to self, where we need God desperately because we ran out of us. So if you're in that place, be encouraged. Be encouraged. You're not alone, and God didn't leave you alone. He didn't abandon you. He's right there with you. You got to look for him, though. Mm-hmm. You got to lean into him. So JD, before we get into the story, take a minute, share something personal about you that very few people in your business life actually know.
Well, in my business life, and so I would think probably very few people know that I spent 9 days in a psychiatric facility, other than colleagues that are very close to me. And I think similarly, there would be other business colleagues that have no idea the depths of darkness that I experienced over the 4 or 5 years of our marriage crumbling and all the different turns of events that took place. So
Yeah.
I hid that from a lot of people. So
I get that. And I get why you would hide that, right? Because that could be like, bad perceptions. It could close off career opportunities, etc. Right. Plus, you're human. You don't want to be rejected. Like nobody does. Right. So I really get that. Thank you for being real and open about that. That takes a lot of courage. I acknowledge you for that. All right, let's get into it. So I want to go back in time prior to the marriage.
Yep.
Let's just start, like, describe real quick your family life. What was life like as a child? Really quick. Were you raised in a home with faith? Was God present? What denomination? And take us right through to high school to up until meeting your wife at the time. So really brief story. Go for it.
I will try to compress it. Yeah, I was raised in a family of 9, a Catholic family. So mom and dad were devout practicing Catholics. I was an altar boy. So I had the full Catholic experience growing up and through high school. And I've always been a man of faith. Certainly the faith has gotten much, much stronger as a result of the adversity I experienced. But 6 boys, 3 girls, very large Catholic, at times dysfunctional family. Was an amateur fighter in high school for a while, fought Golden Gloves for a few years. Until the weight came on, and then I decided I didn't want to get hit by the bigger boys, so I got out of it. But no, childhood was I had a very happy childhood, and a childhood surrounded by faith and a lot of love from my brothers and sisters.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you maintain your faith in high school and into college?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's awesome. Actually, kind of rare nowadays, right? I think college is when something like 80% of young people give up their faith.
Well, when you have an Irish Catholic mother, you don't have a choice.
And there's that dysfunction you mentioned, right?
Yeah, I'm just kidding, but no, they led by example. They were excellent role models to follow. So
that's awesome. Yeah. All right, so how'd you come to meet your wife?
Met her playing in a slow pitch softball league. So at the time that I met her, I wasn't looking for anything. I was 26. I was just beginning my career. I was having fun doing what I wanted to do with the boys and coaching my younger brother's basketball team. So it was all about me. And then I met her playing on a slow pitch softball team. One of her girlfriend's husbands at the time played on the team, and that's how we were introduced. So it was a brief introduction that night, and then we reconnect about 3 months later.
Got it. And what did you fall in love with in her? What did she possess that you were like, this is my gal, man?
Yeah, she was very attractive. She was a beautiful woman. She was very fiery. So I remember the first time that I ran into her again after not talking to her for 3 months. I ran into her at a watering hole in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and tried the old line that I've been meaning to call you. And of course, her response back to me was, "I haven't been sitting by the phone waiting." So, so I was attracted to her fieriness. I was attracted to her compassion in animals, and at the time, her drive and her motivation for where she wanted to go.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things that I did miss early on, so folks ask, now after everything's unfolded, and were there red flags that you missed? And the biggest red flag that I missed was that she was previously married prior to us, meeting each other. So she'd briefly been married for about 8 weeks, and I didn't unpack that enough. I just took her at face value that she was in a controlling and an abusive relationship, was looking for a father figure. And that's probably the biggest red flag that I missed.
Yeah, that's a huge one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. For sure.
Yeah, for sure. And for all you young men out there that are looking for spouses, you're single right now. And the same goes for all you young ladies out there. Take your time to truly get to know the person. And if you see a red flag, do not look past it. Please do not look past it. I used to do this all the time in my dating relationships. I would look past red flags. And just because I was enamored by the person in front of me. And just like you, JD, like I was attracted, and this is going to be real. I was raised in dysfunction. It was a loving home, but there was a lot of dysfunction, right?
Right.
And the dysfunction that was instilled in me as a young boy, I brought into my adult life. And the dysfunction within me was attracted to the dysfunction within the other person. I didn't know that. I didn't know how to articulate that. I just thought, man, she's hot. She's fiery. She's passionate. Like, man, I like her, right? I want to be with her. And what I didn't realize was that all that fiery passion was actually daddy issues.
Yes.
Yeah, just a lot of hurt and childhood trauma in these girls that I was dating. And it would come out as this fiery, controlling, fun, very fun
Yep.
personalities. And man, I was like, the dysfunction in me was like, yes, this is the girl. And I would fall for them. And then once I got deep, man, like they would turn and it
Yep.
would be like a switch would just flip. And I would see this other side, this angry side, this vindictive side in a lot of them, one that would want to hurt me or just had maliciousness in them or false accusations. And they would come at me and I'd be like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, it was so foreign to me.
Yep.
So I'm sharing my story right now, even though this is all about you, because I want BC Nation, I want you to see we all have the same stories, just different combinations.
Right. Right.
So, JD, did you have a run of dating this profile of girl?
No, that's the other, well, I don't want to call it a mistake, but that's one of the things is that prior to her, I only had one other serious relationship. So my track record or my experience in the dating world was limited. And the other mistake, I'll call it a mistake. The other mistake that I made was at the age of 26, we dated for about a year and a half. And for me, which again was an issue, that the clock, I thought the clock was ticking. You're 26, almost 27. It's probably time to settle down, maybe get married. And I remember some hesitation as I was driving to the church to get married, to be honest with you, that I thought, do I really want to be doing this? But I don't have any regrets, looking back, and got two beautiful children out of it. And we had a happy marriage for 17 years, but my dating experience was extremely limited. So, yeah.
Okay. So let's fast forward now into the marriage. We're 17 years in. It's a happy, good marriage. And then all of a sudden a switch flips in your spouse.
Yeah.
What flipped it? Do you know, looking back?
I believe and so I talk about it in the book. I think the tipping point for her. So you mentioned daddy issues, and there certainly were some there. She was estranged from her father for 10 years when I met her. She played her father up as a deadbeat dad. Ironically, he lived in Tampa, Florida, but she played her father up as a deadbeat dad, and they reconnected when our son was 5 or 6. But she was estranged from him for 10 years. They reconnected. We had a relationship with him, which I supported. It was a superficial relationship at best on her part. But he suddenly passed away in 2007 from a massive heart attack. Then his life partner, Brad, so it turns out her father was gay and, came out of the closet when she was 2 years old. So there were definitely some abandonment issues, I believe. And then I think the toxic emotion of guilt is what put her over the edge. When she lost her father, and then 2 or 3 years later, his life partner, who she had been very close to, he also passed away at a relatively young age. And I know, based on evidence that I would uncover later, that is when she turned to drugs. So everything that she was accusing me of doing, she was actually doing. But it was in 2010 when that began, that her accusations against me started out of nowhere, out of the blue. There was nothing, none of my actions would lead her to believe that I actually was doing anything outside of our marriage.
So just to clarify, you were faithful in your marriage, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
And this is a very common story. And I know it's so deep and personal to you. However, it is very common, this story. And that is, we accuse others of the very things we don't like in ourselves.
Right.
So BC Nation, look around you. Like, what do you complain about in other people often? Then look in the mirror.
Right.
Is that the very thing you don't like about yourself? Are you accusing others falsely because you feel guilty about some of the actions you're doing or the way you're living your life?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to make you feel bad. I'm saying that for you to take a good hard look and then run to God with it and ask him to help you, because you're headed down a road of pain and suffering if you're not already in it. And you're probably going to hurt the people you love. So you got to stop it. You got to nip it in the bud. So if this speaks to you in any way, like, we're going to give you what to do. We're going to give you some action steps, JD and I. So JD, continue on with your story here. So she has this traumatic event of losing her dad, and then his life partner, in a homosexual lifestyle that she was also very close with, that somehow spikes all the guilt and abandonment and everything else from childhood all the way through. It flips a switch.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing she's a good woman, right? So it's this involuntary thing that happens in her. She doesn't even know. It's on a subconscious level. So she runs to, comforts herself somehow to self-soothe, which we do as humans, right? And her poison was drugs. What happens next?
Yeah. So when the accusations began, and ultimately that was my undoing. So as you read in the intro, she was pulling on the trust card, and her biggest mantra between her and her mother was that we never had trust in the marriage. So there were a couple of lies in the marriage, which I'm open and honest about in the book, that I lied about drinking too much on a business trip in New Orleans, which she resurrected from 15 years ago. And then at times I would hide cigarettes from my wife and from my kids, and I would lie about it. So she pulled on those two things and really gaslit me to the point where I started to think that maybe I was the reason for the demise of the marriage. Maybe there was never trust in our marriage because of some of the lies that I had early on. And so you start taking that on, you start believing it, because the other issue that I had was I told nobody about it. Nobody knew about what was going on in the marriage. My large extended family, friends, nobody knew what was going on. I stayed on an island and I confided in nobody. And ultimately that was my undoing. And I would end up in a psychiatric facility, hollowed out, and got caught up in the broken mental health care system, got caught up in the broken medical system, where I had my family practitioner at the time involuntarily commit me to a psychiatric facility.
Mm.
Based on the premise that he thought I had bipolar disorder. So I was misdiagnosed with bipolar too.
Yeah. So JD,
Mm-hmm.
why did you not reach out and confide in someone as you're going through this? Well, it was a crucifixion really in your marriage. It's a putting to death your marriage, right?
Right.
And just the pain and the accusations. And I know we're men, and men, we just don't want to ask for help. We go to isolation, and because that's where the enemy wants us.
Yeah.
It's easy to take one man out when he's standing by himself.
Right.
So what was going on inside of you? What was the thought process or the negative self-talk where you're like, I need to confide in someone, even just to, a sounding board, but I'm not going to?
Because I think I got caught up looking inside myself. I became when you say somebody's self-absorbed, it's negative, but I became self-absorbed, trying to look in the mirror and really look to see if in fact I was the reason for what was happening, and perhaps there's maybe a little bit of shame. Maybe again, I was truly trying to figure out what was going on, what prompted all of this, where did these accusations come from? And then ultimately my daughter would also get involved. She was alienated from me for 2 years. She was 15 and very gullible at the time. And so I felt like truly I was on an island, but it was a mistake that I made to not confide in anybody. That's ultimately what caused me to get locked in on my misperception of who I was as a man, who I was as a husband, and as a father. So I lost sight of all of that. I surrendered my identity.
Wow.
Yeah.
What would you say to BC Nation right now, to a man who's in this type of marriage or a woman who's in this type of marriage? They're being accused of things that they know they're not doing, they're not guilty of, but they're starting to doubt themselves because they've heard the lie for so long now.
Yeah, I would think again, two things: really kind of confide in somebody else, have a sounding board or a confidant that you could turn to. And ultimately I would turn to the church, I would turn to a deacon, I would turn to priest, we would go to therapy. Um, so recognize that, but do what you can to try to stay true to yourself. Don't, I mean, recognize your faults, right? There were things that I did in the marriage that obviously she was able to pull on and really begin to bury me with. But um, yeah, I lost sight of all the good qualities that in me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the biggest issue is not to find somebody to talk to that you can confide in, and ultimately that would happen. I would have an army that would surround me once I was in a psychiatric facility. I had a couple of my brothers kind of come to my rescue because they wanted to figure out what the hell was going on. And I'm glad they came to town, even though I told them, man, no need to come. They said, no, 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 we're coming. And they were able,
Man,
yeah,
it's just, as men, we have such a sense of pride, don't we? I mean,
right.
you're in a psychiatric ward, like impending doom is coming at you, and you're like, no, I'm good, man, I'm good. Like, it's the way our brain lies to us, our egos, right? And you're not alone in this. I
Yeah,
speak with a lot of men in my coaching business, and this is exactly what they do, how they
right.
show up. I've done it. I'm like, no, I'm good, man. I'm fine. I'm working it out. I'm working on it. That's the famous line. I'm working on it.
We'll figure it out. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we'll figure it out alone on my own island by myself. I'll fix me. Okay. How's that working for you? Well, not well.
Well, because I think the other piece of it, Joseph, is you're really, your mind is twisted because you're trying to figure out how the hell did you end up here? How did this happen?
Yeah.
You're trying to sort that out first before you can explain to somebody why you got to where you got to, how
Yeah.
you ended up there. And there
Yeah.
was so much. I was lacking clarity, and that's why the title of the book, the third gift. The third gift is what gave me clarity. I mean, that's when God intervened and finally said, "Here's your answer to what was going on in your marriage."
Tell us more about that. How did that come to pass?
Yeah, so spent 9 days in psychiatric lockup. Whether it was right or wrong, I ended up staying in the marriage, a very abusive marriage. It became more abusive when I got home. Off and on, it was the "I hate you, don't leave me" type mentality, where they pull you in and smack you in the face and then set you back out again, and just emotionally confuse the hell out of you. So stayed in the marriage for about 7 months after coming out of the psychiatric facility, and then um, separated. I was alien. I was manipulated out of the home, and I was told to go to a hotel for a week or two, which at the time I didn't know that meant you're never coming back into the house. So there were some other things that transpired legally that she did behind my back that forced me out of my house. So ultimately, we ended up at mediation, and at our first mediation is when the revelation was made. In addition to trying to mediate around alimony and separation of assets and so forth, so on, through the mediators, when she accused me of giving her, herpes. So the third gift, people say, well, the third gift's not herpes. The third gift is not herpes, but the third gift is the clarity that came along with it, where this mediator dropped on the table after making their initial offer, said, oh, by the way, she wanted me to let you know that you gave her herpes. And it was at that point that, you got betrayal, you got disappointment, and you got joy all at the same time wrapped into one, where I finally realized, okay, now it makes sense. She's been out running around on me because I know I haven't been with anybody. So it was a being in the medical pharmaceutical field. I looked at the test. It was a DNA test, and she was 100% tested positive for herpes 2. So that's opened my eyes, and that led me to discover all sorts of things through medical claims and pharmacy claims that I had no idea I had access to as the primary card holder for our insurance. But I spent hours and hours and hours, and that's where I uncovered the drug addiction, uncovered the fact that there were multiple STDs that she had, and led us down the road of an alimony trial, because in North Carolina, if there's proof of infidelity, there is no alimony. So that's when the long drawn out legal battle began, and our journey through the legal system for 4 years.
Wow.
But it was a gift. It was a gift that again, God really intervened and saved my life at that point and provided me with, emotional freedom is what I like to call it. Because I could
So how was your relationship with God at that point? Like you're on this island by yourself, you're boxing out your bros and people that love and care about you. And it was your way of surviving because you're trying to figure it out all in your head. What the heck happened? How did I get here?
Yeah.
Were you speaking with God at the time? Were you spending time with him? Were you boxing him out as well?
No, I was spending time with him. I was asking him for clarity. And yeah, I was asking him for clarity. And that's what people say. Why did you stay in the marriage? After you were in a psychiatric, why? And I'm glad I did, because had I not stuck it out, this card may never have been revealed. It may never, and I don't know where I'd be today emotionally. I don't know where my relationship with my daughter would be today. So through all of this, obviously she's now 22 years old and just graduated from college a couple of weekends ago. And my relationship with my kids is better than it's ever been. It's outstanding, but I don't know where I'd be today without that. So I start every day just with gratitude that he intervened. He absolutely intervened.
So good. BC Nation, remember what God says, right? Like he will bring the truth. The truth will shine light on the lies and bring the darkness into the light so that all can be revealed. And this is the clarity you can't see in the darkness.
No.
Right. And JD's praying to God. And I just want to say, as you're going through your struggle right now, whatever you're dealing with in a relationship of toxicity, the biggest thing you can be doing, the best thing you could be doing is spending time with God. Even if you're boxing others out, closing your heart off to others, not letting them in to help you or love on you, do not do that with God.
Yeah,
Run to him. Go ahead.
I found a lot of peace and tranquility in church. So even in empty church, where I would just go and sit. When things would start to overwhelm me, that's where I would go.
Yeah, that's so good.
Wherever I was, whatever city I was traveling to, whatever I was doing. Yeah.
That's critical, right? Is having that time with God in silence, just sitting there, even if you're saying nothing, just sitting in your Father's presence. Yeah. Or sitting in his arms and let him comfort you. And what does he say in the Bible? He says, bring your burdens to me.
Yeah.
Like lay them on me. Stop carrying the weight of your own destiny. Right. Yeah. Like, but yet we are like, man, we're little control freaks. We're like, no, I got it. Meanwhile, like our faces in the mud, we're dragging. And he's like, son, daughter, like, bring it to me. So JD, how did you come through this? How did God bring you through this to where not only did you have clarity, and I get how important that clarity was because it showed all the lies, and immediately you can make a decision as a man to say, wait a second, these STD tests, this reveals that, unfortunately, my wife was out cheating on me. So right there, you could release all the guilt and shame of like, you're this evil person and all these accusations. Maybe they're true about you. And you're like, no, they're not. They're actually revealing her.
Right.
Now, we're not here today, BC Nation. I just want to be clear. We're not here today to kick JD's ex-wife under the bus.
No.
This woman is a daughter of God. That is not easy to see sometimes when they're covered in dysfunction. There's a person in your life right now, as you're listening right now, who is covered in dysfunction, like covered in mud, and you just can't see them anymore. But you must believe they're in there. And they are deserving of God's mercy and love and compassion and forgiveness as much as you. Even if you're self-righteous and their sins are very obvious. And this is something I just challenge all of us to do, is to look past the hurt that they're causing you and to see the precious child that's hurting, the child of God that was wounded as a child, right? I mean, look at the stuff she went through with her dad. And I'm not giving her a free pass by any means. Her adult decisions are hers. They belong to her. But look at how she started out in life. Like set up not to win. Let's be real. So, JD, how do you look at her today?
Well, and I wanted to, there was a quote that I read in a book, 4 or 5 years ago when I was starting to go through it, and was one that really kind of smacked me between the eyes. The quote said, "You only love God as much as you love the one you like the least." And that I read that quote like 2 to 3 weeks after the accusation and then after the reveal. But to answer your question directly, Joseph, the way I look at it, for me today, it's empathy, it's sympathy, and it's quite frankly, it's sadness, because she had a ton of promise, and she was a good wife and was a good mother for 17 years, and lost her way. So there's no anger, there's no hatred. I've never had any anger or hatred towards her, because the emotions of gratitude, the emotions of emotional freedom, there was left no room for anger or hatred towards her.
Yeah. Now, it's so difficult to forgive someone that's hurt you so much and for so long. Have you been able to do that with her? Like to
Absolutely.
look her in the eye and say, I forgive you?
I haven't seen her, so I haven't. I've had no communication with her in over 3 years. I haven't seen her probably in 5 years.
Yeah.
But if I were to run into, yeah, I would let her know that I forgive her. And sadly, that's all. Our kids don't really have a relationship with her anymore. They're young adults now, but they all know the truth. But that's all they want. They forgive their mother. They just want her to own what she's done so they could have some type of relationship. But she doesn't have the mental capacity to do that. But if I were to cross paths with her, yeah, absolutely, I would let her know I've forgiven her, and I forgave her mother way back when. I mean, 3, 4 years ago, I quickly got to forgiveness with both of them.
Wow.
Because of the fact that they set me free.
Yeah.
And because of the fact that I had the truth, and I was able to get my feet back under me, and, and continue to grow.
Yeah, for sure. That's so good, right? And sometimes we forget that forgiveness, not only it's not so much about setting the other person free. Sometimes it's setting ourselves free first.
Yes.
And this is God's way. The way you get set free from the hurt that's been done to you, BC Nation, is you forgive the person who hurt you. There's no other way around it. This is God's way. This is why while Jesus is hanging on the cross, he says, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. He sets the example. He forgives the perpetrator that hung him on the cross, which is you and I. And he says, do the same.
Yep.
So forgive that spouse, forgive that sibling, forgive that parent that hurt you so long ago. And you will be set free. Until you do that, you're still carrying it.
Yeah.
And God wants to release you. Is there anything you want to say around that, JD?
And it was cathartic to be able to just to recognize that her actions are driven by something else. And the other piece that I had to seek some religious counsel on is wrapping your head around the fact that the devil is indeed real, right? Yeah. Satan was once an angel too, right? But I knew that, right? I know evil exists. We see it, we live it, we see it. But when you're laying next to it and you've spent 25 years with it, it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that somebody could be just that evil. Because the other thing that I haven't mentioned yet, and there's a lot to the story, but the other thing I would discover, Joseph, after I'd been out of the house about a year, she was also poisoning me with arsenic. So that was the reason for the weight loss and a lot of the medical symptoms that I began to experience, when our marriage started to unravel. So there was one discovery after another. And by the time I discovered that, it didn't even really faze me. It's just like, oh, well, okay. She was poisoning me with arsenic on top of everything else.
So, like, you found evidence of that, just to clarify, of
Yeah,
arsenic? Like,
I had a positive hair and nail test. So I had a long medical journey trying to figure out why I was having some of the symptoms I was having, why some of my blood work was off, whether it was white blood cell counts. I mean, I was tested for leukemia, early onsets of Lou Gehrig's disease, Parkinson's. They couldn't find anything until I got to a liver specialist and shared with him some of my story. Told him I had had a blood test done for heavy metals poisoning. And he said, well, a blood test won't pick that up. It'll pick up acute exposure, but it won't pick up chronic exposure. So he did a hair and nail test and confirmed that indeed I had been chronically exposed to arsenic. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
BC Nation, I want to say this. And JD, I heard you. I heard what you said. One of the most difficult things to do is to separate the precious son and daughter of God, who's hurting you and doing evil to you, from the evil itself. Sometimes we look at them and we call them evil. They're not. They're a hurting human just like the rest of us, but they're allowing evil to happen through them. And they don't know better. It's a blind spot, right? They're hurting that bad. And the enemy is the real perpetrator.
Yeah.
And I just want to bring that into light because the enemy likes to hide behind people. He's a coward. And he does not want to be seen. That's where his power is. So as your wife is poisoning you with arsenic, it's very easy to look at her and call her evil, when in fact she's not. She's just a hurt child that's doing evil things.
Right.
The enemy is the one that's like whispering lies in her ears that you can't trust him. He's going to hurt you. You better hurt him first.
Yeah.
Right? He's going to leave you. You better abandon him first. He's going to cheat on you. You better cheat on him first. These are the lies that are happening in the other person, and it's all the enemy. So I want to say that because that's a very, very, very important distinction. And we want the enemy to take all the blame, not the person. Yes, the person is responsible for their actions, but they're not at fault. And I know that's a little play on words. But when it's blind spots and it's hurts and trauma from childhood and they have no control over it for the most part, it's happening on a subconscious level. They're not at fault, technically. They are responsible, sometimes legally, for their behavior. So we're not letting them off the hook, but it's very important. And the reason why this distinction is critical, it allows you to release blaming, right? Because blame gets you nowhere. Blame, the enemy loves when we blame others because we never then set them free and we never set ourselves free. We all just stay and devour our own poison of hatred towards people. Yep. So remove the blame. That's my main point there. Thank you for letting me say that, JD. Do you agree with that or disagree with that? And I know that's tough the way I'm presenting that.
No, I absolutely agree with it. I absolutely agree with it. I would add that free will is a dangerous tool, right? It's a very dangerous tool. And it's an easier path to go down to try to destroy others than trying to build yourself up or to recognize your faults or your areas of development. It's easier to project that on somebody else. It's easier to make excuses. It's easier to play the victim card. It takes a lot less energy.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it takes a lot less energy to destroy a building than to build one.
Yes, it does. And it's a lot faster.
It's a lot faster.
It's a lot faster too. JD, let's move past this. Sure. What is God doing in your life now? Like, what does he have for you? Like, is there a purpose that's been revealed like through this story? What are you up to now, brother?
Well, so in addition to my full-time job in the pharmaceutical industry, so I'm using this book and I'm using it to try to give back to others and to try to do some good for others. So I'm working right now. I'm looking for some additional collaborators. I know fundraising is your area of expertise, going back to when you were 19 years old. But
that was so long ago.
Yeah, but I'm looking to be able to take some of the proceeds from the book and do some good for others. So I'm working with an area called Mercy Center for Women out of Pennsylvania, donating a percentage of the proceeds back to them. It's a center for abused and victimized women that are trying to get back, homeless women at times, trying to get back on their feet. And I'm looking to do some other collaborations with some former military, some organizations that support former military folks struggling with PTSD and substance abuse. So I'm not only looking to share my message of hope and encouragement, but hopefully one day have the financial means to do a lot of good for other folks. Because during my darkest days, I had a lot of wonderful people step up, were not only generous with me financially, but also emotionally. They gave up their time unselfishly to me. And there was a lot of people that the good Lord put in my life to walk with me and my kids to get to the other side of this. So I'm hoping to give back is my mission.
Yeah, I hear you. JD, I acknowledge you for committing to put funds towards women that resemble your ex-wife. That's very, that honestly, that surprises me in a good way. Okay. I was expecting to hear like you're going to, put it towards causes and charities that help men and in relationships where they're being falsely accused, et cetera, to recover, to get through it, therapy, counseling, et cetera. But instead you said, no, I want to help the women that are in those situations that were abandoned by their dads or their moms or whatever, that are now carrying all that dysfunction in them. I want to help them. Yeah. I want to help people like my wife. Like, bro, that's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. That's God right there. Yeah. That tells me you're healed. Like, that's evidence that you're healed. It's a beautiful story. And I ask that God blesses you with abundance, financial abundance, to do exactly that. And that he increases and multiplies your book to really have massive impact in the world in these areas, because these are very real struggles that we deal with.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And just know that he's here right now listening, because we're speaking about God. God's getting the glory for your story. And let me be clear. This ain't your story. This is God's story happening through your life.
Right.
It's his story of love and mercy and forgiveness and redemption. Yeah. And you showed up, man. You fought the good fight. You're through it. You're out the other end. And now you're going to teach others how to do it, how to get through it. It's all God, bro. So
without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Really well done. All right. So, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up the show here? Anything we missed that you want to say to BC Nation?
The final thought would be gratitude, right? So for me, gratitude saved my life too. So on some of the darkest days when you want to sit back and question and you want to fall into victimhood and you want to be absorbed in self-pity, you recognize that you've got to sit down and count your blessings and recognize that what you're going through, other people's struggles are far worse. And this was the message I carried to my kids as they struggled throughout their college and high school careers with this whole nightmare, is the foundation of gratitude, and recognize what you have versus focusing on what you've lost or what had been taken away from you.
Absolutely. Excuse me while my alarm on my phone goes off.
Sure.
You got to love that. I just started a new eating regimen, so it's reminding me it's time to eat. Look at that. I'm just saying it live on my show because that's what I do. All right. So welcome, JD, to my favorite part of the show. Welcome to the confession round. This is where I'm going to ask you 10 quick fire questions. You'll have about 3 seconds to answer each. It's just for fun. Are you ready, sir?
Sure.
What's your favorite thing about God?
He's all-knowing.
Yeah. What's your least favorite thing about God?
The time frame in which he reveals his answers.
Yeah. God, could I get the clarity like a year ago?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I believe we're all struggling with something at any given moment of our life. It's just part of the human condition. You shared a lot of your previous struggles. What are you currently struggling with right now, either professionally or personally?
I think nothing professionally. I think on the personal front is true clarity on the purpose, the true purpose going forward. I think I know what it is, but what does it actually look like?
Yeah, I get that. What are you most afraid of?
What am I most afraid of? I don't believe it or not, I don't fear anything.
After what you've been through, I think I believe you.
Yeah.
What did you spend way too much time doing this past year?
That's a great question. Huh.
That's why I get the big bucks.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, provocative questions. I would probably have to say promoting the book.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. What secret fear do you have about people?
um, mm, I've moved beyond it. I'm my technician who's in the room with me, but I've moved beyond it, and I'm growing in that area. Initially, it was being able to trust again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being able to fully see people and recognize that they don't have hidden agendas.
Yeah. Are you there yet, if you were being totally honest, or not yet?
I am there now. Yes, I am.
That's
I,
awesome.
I
Praise
am.
God, man.
Yeah.
What do you wish you had learned sooner about God?
I think I think I shouldn't have taken him for granted at times.
Mm.
I think when things were good and stable in life and in my marriage, and things are great. My life is great. But when you get comfortable and complacent, I think I lost sight of the fact that those blessings were from him. I mean, my faith was always good, but he was on the back burner. Now he's front and center. He's front and center, and I start my day with him. And yeah, so you become complacent, you become arrogant perhaps, and humility takes a step back, and that's when he taps you on the shoulder to remind you who's in charge here.
I love it. Well said.
Sometimes he punches you in the face. He doesn't tap you on the shoulder. But
Listen, you've been punched and kicked, my friend. I've been punched and kicked. I say God has used a 2x4 on the back of my head more times than I can count because
yeah,
I'm stubborn, right? Like I was the little control freak. So God gets our attention. And for
yeah,
me, I learned through pain, not pleasure. So, like,
right.
God will use whatever means because he loves us. Pick 3 words. Actually, before that, what's a new habit you want to create in your life?
Continue to well, I'm on that journey, but continue to consistently exercise. Fitness. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What's a bad habit you want to break?
Oh man. Cigarettes. I've got to put the cigarettes away. Yeah.
What are you doing, man? You're a temple of God. That's like graffitiing his temple.
I
Why
know.
you, why are you disrespecting your father like that, man? Stop it. Pick 3 words to describe who you are now.
Joyful, grateful, blessed.
Yeah. Pick 3 words to describe who you were before you surrendered all of this to God.
Perhaps at times arrogant, overconfident, and complacent.
Yeah. Deadly combination, isn't it?
Yes.
And last question, if you could come back to life after you died, look your family and friends, your kids in the eyes and tell them only one piece of advice about life, eternity, all of it, what would you say to them?
To live for eternity. That this isn't heaven. We're just passing through. And if I'm coming back from eternity, to share with them all the joys and all the light that there is on the other side.
Yeah. Keep going. In a few years, it won't matter. Keep
Right.
going. Any
Right.
final wisdom? What's the one thing you want my listener to know about seeking real relationship with God and not taking him for granted?
I would say that when adversity comes in whatever form, because we will all face it, to absolutely pick it up and embrace it. You're not going to be able to run from it. And there is so much more that you can learn from it.
Yeah.
You
Awesome.
can learn a ton from it.
And JD, where does BC Nation go to pick up your book or learn more about you or connect with you if they so choose?
Well, I am on Instagram at the Third Gift, on Facebook at the Third Gift, on TikTok at the Third Gift, and then my website thirdgift.com. The book is available through Ballast Books. That's BALLAST Books. And then also Amazon, Target, all of your major online retailers.
Just to clarify the website again, please go ahead.
Thirdgift.com. So the third gift was taken. So my domain for the website's different than some of my social media platforms. So
Okay, got it. So I misspoke earlier in the show in the introduction, BC Nation. So it's not the third gift, it's thirdgift.com. Thirdgift.com. Thank you for that correction, JD. JD, I wish you God's love, peace, and joy in your life, sir.
Thank you, my friend. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I appreciate the inspiration that you're bringing into my life today. So thank you for what you're doing, and continue to do it.